Breaking news, some major breaking news happening in Washington right now. Reports that President Trump has fired Attorney General Pam Bondi. Now, the AG has faced criticism over her leadership at the Justice Department. She faced a contentious hearing on Capitol Hill. Earlier today, the president said Attorney General Pam Bondi is a wonderful person. So we continue to follow this. Let's get right out to News Nation's Tom Dempsey, who was live for us there at the White House. Tom, I know all of this is just kind of coming in right now. What is the latest you can tell us?
Hey folks, welcome back to another DRN podcast episode. Behind the closed doors of the Oval Office, Trump is in full volcanic meltdown, the kind that clears rooms and sends staffers scrambling to delete call logs.
Yeah, so reports surfacing now that Attorney General Pam Bondi will be being replaced as Attorney General. You know, we reached out to the White House earlier today, and the team officially, released a statement complimenting Pam Bondi and President Trump describing her as a wonderful person. But this is obviously a big development we are tracking right now. We've reached out to the White House for an updated statement on all of this. For some quick background here, obviously Attorney General Pam Bondi, she came to this role as a big supporter of the president. She was a former attorney general for the state of Florida and had some experience as a prosecutor taking on the opioid epidemic in Florida. And she was even a former attorney for President Trump. And she, repeated those claims of a weaponized Department of Justice. But, fast forward to today, she has recently faced a lot of criticism from...
Because the person he personally selected, personally elevated, and personally trusted as his ultimate weapon just turned around and drove a blade straight through him. That blade belongs to Pam Bondi, the woman who was supposed to be Trump's avenging angel. The woman handpicked to settle every score, prosecute every enemy, and deliver the revenge agenda that fueled his entire return to power.
Faced some questions, I should say, over the release of the Epstein files and the questions related to the investigation of Jeffrey Epstein, with Democrats and the House Oversight Committee recently issuing a subpoena against her to come in for questioning regarding that investigation. And she's faced some big concerns and questions over her failure to release all the files related to the investigation and her handling of redactions related to files in the Jeffrey Epstein case. Even just this morning, Representative Nancy Mace from South Carolina, a Republican, said that she would welcome the news of Attorney General Pam Bondi's firing.
Our Deputy Attorney General and a very talented and respected legal mind, Todd Blanche, will step in to serve in as acting Attorney General. Didn't need to hear it from sources. You hear it from the source himself, President Trump, there confirming that Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, will replace Pam Bondi as Attorney General. This is a major shift within the Trump administration, and also for Pam Bondi, who has been by President Trump's side for over a decade, working in the first admin, representing him throughout his legal woes, and now you're seeing him replace her with the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche. Now, I've been speaking with sources ahead of this, and what they told me was there was a meeting at the White House last night where this was discussed, and now we're seeing the president make this major announcement today. But this all ties back to, and President Trump doesn't mention the Epstein files in this post, but it ties back to the MAGA fracture over the Epstein files that has plagued this administration ever since the beginning of President Trump's second term.
And instead of delivering that revenge, she just sent a message so devastating, so utterly destructive to everything Trump has been building, that it triggered a response you have to see to believe. We're talking about Truth Social posts that read like they were typed by someone whose hands were literally shaking with rage. We're talking about a public firing conducted with all the grace and dignity of a reality show elimination.
Right now, we are continuing our coverage of breaking news out of the White House. A senior administration official confirming that Attorney General Pam Bondi has been fired. Sources say this decision comes as the president grew increasingly frustrated with her and after the pair allegedly had a heated confrontation at the White House just last week. We are also now learning that Todd Blanche will work as the acting Attorney General effective immediately. Meet the Press moderator, Kristen Welker, joins us now with more on this breaking news. Kristen, my first question is, how did we get here? How did we get here today? What do we know about that alleged heated argument they had just last week at the White House?
Morgan, good to be with you. Well, first of all, it's notable because, of course, we know that Pam Bondi was with President Trump when he went to the Supreme Court just yesterday to hear those oral arguments on his attempt to try to end birthright citizenship. So the timing of this certainly notable, but this has been bubbling up for quite some time, Morgan. This did not necessarily come out of the blue. We know that President Trump and, quite frankly, some of his allies have been quite frustrated with how Pam Bondi handled the Epstein files matter. We also know that President Trump was frustrated by the fact that
we're talking about the complete and total implosion of a relationship that was supposed to be the cornerstone of Trump's second-term justice agenda. Let me take you inside exactly what happened, because the details of this story are absolutely insane. When Trump first brought Pam Bondi into the administration, the expectation could not have been clearer. This woman was going to be the tip of the spear. She was going to walk into the Department of Justice and immediately start prosecuting the people Trump has been fantasizing about destroying for years.
he didn't feel as though she was aggressive enough in terms of going after some of his perceived political enemies. So that was at the root of it as well. I remember talking to one of the president's top allies who said there was a sense that she just wasn't very good at the role of attorney general, both from a legal perspective, but also from the perspective of being a spokesperson, being the person out front on TV who had to litigate all of these matters on behalf of the Trump administration. As you know, that is a quality that is deeply important to President Trump. I just got some reaction from Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna. Morgan, as you'll remember, he, of course, is one of the leading members of Congress trying to get the Epstein files released. In a text message to me, he said the Epstein files cover-up took down Bondi. Massey and I, a reference to Congressman Thomas Massey and I, have been calling for accountability since she violated our Epstein Transparency Act. We will not rest until the rich and powerful men who abused young girls are prosecuted. So that the reaction from Congressman Ro Khanna, as reaction is starting to pour in to this really stunning development out of the Trump White House. Morgan.
Kristen Walker, moderator of Meet the Press. Kristen, thanks so much for the update on
James Comey, the former FBI director who had the audacity to investigate Trump's campaign connections. Letitia James, the New York Attorney General who built her entire political brand on pursuing Trump and his business empire. Every prosecutor who ever filed a motion against him. Every investigator who ever opened a file with his name on it. Every single person who ever crossed him during those wilderness years between terms. Bondi was supposed to be the instrument of their destruction. She was supposed to be the legal sledgehammer that would smash through every obstacle and deliver the vengeance Trump's supporters had been promised since day one. But something went terribly wrong. From the very beginning, Bondi wasn't moving fast enough. She wasn't being aggressive enough. She wasn't delivering the headlines Trump craves, where his enemies are led away in handcuffs while news cameras capture every humiliating moment. Instead, she was being careful. She was being measured. She was actually consulting with career prosecutors about whether cases had legal merit before filing them. She was acting like an attorney general instead of a personal hit woman. And every single day that passed without those perp walks, Trump's frustration grew hotter and more dangerous. According to people who witnessed these interactions firsthand, Trump would rage about Bondi's incompetence behind closed doors. He would demand to know why Comey wasn't in prison yet. He would scream about why Letitia James was still walking free and appearing on cable news to criticize him. He would ask the same questions over and over, his voice rising each time, his face reddening, his advisors exchanging nervous glances as they tried to explain the legal complexities that Trump simply refused to acknowledge or accept. The Epstein files became the flashpoint. These documents have been a ticking time bomb under Trump's entire administration. Everyone knows there's something in those files that powerful people don't want the public to see. Everyone knows that the release process has been suspiciously slow and suspiciously selective. And Bondi, as Attorney General, was the person responsible for managing that process. She was the gatekeeper. She was the one deciding what got released, what stayed hidden, what narrative the public would be allowed to construct from the fragments they received. And by every account from insiders who understand how these things work, Bondi was making mistake after mistake after mistake. She was alienating Republicans in Congress who wanted more transparency. She was frustrating Democrats who smelled a cover-up. She was failing to satisfy anyone, least of all the president who appointed her specifically to handle situations exactly like this one. The congressional pressure kept building. Committees were demanding answers answers. Subpoenas were being drafted. Bondi was facing the very real prospect of having to sit in front of lawmakers and explain under oath why certain names were protected while victims were exposed. And Trump, watching this disaster unfold from the White House, was reaching the end of his notoriously short patience. The breaking point came with brutal suddenness. There was no private conversation where Trump explained his concerns and gave Bondi an opportunity to resign gracefully. There was no dignified transition where both parties released carefully crafted statements about mutual respect and future endeavors. There was none of the ceremonial niceties that typically accompany the departure of a cabinet-level official. Instead, Trump reached for his phone, opened Truth Social, and fired his attorney general in full public view for the entire world to witness. The Post framed it as a transition to the private sector, but everyone in Washington speaks this language fluently. Everyone understood exactly what those words actually meant. Pam Bondi was out, done, finished, humiliated on the platform Trump uses to communicate his most unfiltered thoughts to his most devoted followers. And here's the detail that makes this entire situation so devastating. Bondi didn't just accept her fate quietly. She didn't just slink away into the shadows of private practice, hoping everyone would forget her brief and inglorious tenure. According to sources close to the situation, Bondi was genuinely emotional about this entire experience. She had hoped for something different. She had hoped for a graceful exit. She had hoped to leave with her reputation intact and her legacy as something more than just another body tossed from the Trump administration carousel. She wanted dignity. She wanted respect. She wanted the basic professional courtesy that any high-level official might reasonably expect after serving at the president's pleasure. Trump gave her none of that. He gave her a Truth Social post and a one-way ticket to political irrelevance. And in response, Bondi sent a message back. Not a public statement, not a carefully worded press release, but something far more damaging. She sent a message through her silence, through her body language, through the whispers that began circulating through Washington's permanent political class almost immediately after her firing was announced. The message was simple and absolutely devastating to everything Trump has been trying to build. The message was that Trump's revenge agenda has limits, that his power to prosecute his enemies isn't absolute, that there are institutional constraints and legal realities that even the most loyal attorney general cannot simply wish away or bully into submission. Think about what that means for a moment. Trump's entire political identity, his entire appeal to his most devoted supporters, is built on the promise of retribution. He promised to prosecute the people who investigated him. He promised to go after the prosecutors who charged him. He promised to settle every score and even up every grudge. And now, his own hand-picked attorney general, the person specifically selected to deliver that revenge, has been fired because she couldn't make it happen. Not because she was disloyal, not because she was secretly working against him, but because the cases aren't strong enough, because the legal basis isn't solid enough, because courts and institutional processes still exist and still function even when the president wishes they wouldn't. Bondi's departure sends a chilling signal to everyone in Trump's orbit and everyone watching from the outside. It says that the revenge agenda is stalling. It says that prosecuting political enemies is harder than Trump imagined it would be. It says that the rule of law, battered and bruised though it may be, still imposes real constraints on what even the most determined president can accomplish through sheer force of will. Now let's talk about what happens next, because this story is still unfolding and the implications are enormous. Trump has already named Todd Blanche as acting attorney general. Blanche is a known quantity in Trump world. He's been in the inner circle. He's demonstrated loyalty through every twist and turn of Trump's legal battles. He's exactly the kind of person Trump trusts to carry out his wishes without hesitation or independent judgment. And there are already reports circulating that Trump is considering Lee Zeldin as a permanent replacement. Zeldin is a former congressman from New York who built his entire political career on unwavering support for Trump and everything Trump represents. He's someone who has never shown any inclination toward the kind of institutional caution that apparently doomed Bondi's tenure. He's someone who understands that his job, if he gets it, is not to be the Attorney General of the United States in any traditional sense. His job would be to be Trump's Attorney General, to do what Trump wants done, to prosecute who Trump wants prosecuted, to use the immense power of the Department of Justice as an extension of Trump's personal will and political agenda. This is the chilling reality of where we stand. Trump is systematically reshaping his cabinet to eliminate anyone who demonstrates even the slightest hesitation about using government power for personal vengeance. Kristi Noem got pushed out of Homeland Security. Bondi got publicly fired from Justice. Every departure follows the same pattern. Someone fails to deliver exactly what Trump wants, exactly when he wants it, and suddenly they're gone, replaced by someone more pliable, more aggressive, more willing to subordinate their professional judgment to Trump's personal demands. The message being sent to every remaining cabinet secretary, every agency head, every political appointee throughout the federal government is unmistakable. Your job security depends entirely on your willingness to do whatever Trump tells you to do, not on your competence, not on your experience, not on your understanding of the law or the Constitution or the proper functioning of the executive branch, just on your loyalty and your willingness to act on that loyalty without question or hesitation. This is what authoritarian governance looks like in practice. Not dramatic moments of tanks in the streets or obvious constitutional crises, but the steady, relentless replacement of independent-minded officials with pure loyalists, the gradual transformation of government institutions from neutral arbiters of law and policy into instruments of personal power, the methodical elimination of anyone who might say, "We can't do that," or "That's not legal," or "There are constraints we need to respect." Bondi's firing is a perfect case study in how this process works. She wasn't disloyal in any traditional sense. She was a Trump appointee who presumably supported the president's broader agenda. But she was also a former Attorney General of Florida who understood how prosecutions actually work. She understood that you can't just file charges against someone because the president doesn't like them. She understood that cases need evidence and legal theories that can survive judicial scrutiny. She understood that the Department of Justice has institutional norms and professional standards that exist for good reason. And that understanding, that basic professional competence, became her fatal flaw. It made her too slow, too cautious, too unwilling to simply do what Trump wanted, regardless of legal reality. And so she had to go. The Epstein files connection adds another layer of complexity and danger to this entire situation. These documents have been radioactive since the moment their existence became public knowledge. There are persistent rumors that Trump's name appears in them. There are questions about what exactly his relationship with Epstein entailed and whether the files contain information that could be politically devastating if released in full. Bondi's handling of these files, whatever it was, clearly didn't satisfy Trump, and her scheduled congressional testimony about those files was looming when Trump pulled the trigger on her firing. The timing is impossible to ignore. You don't fire your Attorney General days before she's supposed to testify about the most politically sensitive documents in government possession unless you're worried about what she might say under oath, unless you're concerned that her testimony might reveal something you desperately need to keep hidden, unless you've decided that replacing her with someone more controllable is worth the political cost of a very public, very humiliating firing. And here's what makes this entire situation even more volatile. The Republican Party is watching all of this unfold and making calculations about their own political survival. Nancy Mace, a Republican representative who built her brand on conservative principles, has already formally documented her concerns about Bondi's handling of the Epstein files. She's put in writing that Bondi handled things terribly and undermined the president. When Republicans start publicly criticizing Trump appointees in formal congressional letters, the partisan firewall that has protected Trump through every previous scandal is starting to crack. Mace's calculation is clear. She's decided that being on the right side of Epstein file accountability matters more to her constituents and her political future than being on the right side of Trump loyalty. And if one Republican is making that calculation publicly, you can guarantee that dozens more are making it privately, watching carefully to see how this plays out before they decide whether to follow her lead. The Democratic response to all of this is predictable but no less damaging for being predictable. Every Democrat in Congress is pointing to Bondi's firing as proof that Trump is trying to weaponize the Justice Department. They're pointing to the pattern of firings and replacements as evidence of a president who tolerates zero independence from his subordinates. They're using this story to reinforce every narrative they've been building about Trump being a threat to democracy and the rule of law. And unlike many Democratic attacks on Trump, this one actually has documentary evidence supporting it. They can point to the Truth Social post. They can point to the timing relative to the Epstein file testimony. They can point to the pattern of previous firings. They can point to Mace's letter as Republican confirmation that something is seriously wrong with how this administration is handling sensitive investigations. This is ammunition that will appear in campaign advertisements throughout the midterm cycle. Every Republican running for office will be asked whether they agree with Trump's handling of this situation. Every candidate will have to explain why they support or oppose a president who fires his attorney general for not prosecuting his political enemies aggressively enough. The broader implications for governance are genuinely alarming regardless of your political perspective. When you run an administration based on personal loyalty rather than professional competence, you get chaos and dysfunction. You get people in positions of enormous responsibility who were selected not because they understand the complex machinery of federal government, but because they've demonstrated unwavering fealty to one person. You get a constant churn of personnel as loyalists fail to deliver impossible results and are replaced by new loyalists who will eventually fail for the same reasons. You get policy implementation that is erratic and inconsistent because institutional knowledge is being systematically purged in favor of political reliability. You get a government that cannot perform its basic functions because the people running it are more focused on pleasing the president than on serving the public. This is what we're watching happen in real time, and Bondi's firing is just the latest and most visible example of a much deeper rot spreading through the executive branch. The human dimension of this story shouldn't be overlooked either. Pam Bondi is a real person with a real career and real professional reputation that just got publicly destroyed. Whatever you think of her politics or her performance as Attorney General, the manner of her firing was brutal and humiliating in a way that would devastate anyone. She found out about her own termination through a social media post. She had no opportunity to prepare her staff or manage her departure with any dignity. She was simply tossed aside like a contestant on a reality show who failed to impress the host. And the people who witnessed this happening are drawing their own conclusions about what it means to work for this president. Every ambitious lawyer who might otherwise consider serving in a Trump administration is watching Bondi's humiliation and wondering if they really want to subject themselves to that kind of treatment. Every current administration official is looking over their shoulder and wondering if they're next. The talent pool willing to serve is shrinking, and the people who remain willing are increasingly those with nothing to lose and everything to gain from absolute loyalty. The chilling message Bondi sent back, whether she intended to or not, is that the emperor has no clothes. Trump's revenge agenda is a fantasy that cannot be realized through legal means. His enemies aren't going to prison because the cases against them don't exist. The Epstein files, whatever they contain, cannot be managed in a way that simultaneously protects Trump and satisfies congressional and public demands for transparency. The Department of Justice, even when staffed with loyalists, still operates within a legal framework that imposes real constraints on what can be done. And a president who fires people for failing to achieve the impossible will eventually run out of people willing to try. This is the reality of the Trump administration at this moment. A president losing control of his own revenge narrative, a former attorney general whose departure signals the limits of presidential power rather than its expansion, a Republican Party watching nervously as their leaders' vulnerabilities become increasingly impossible to ignore, a Democratic opposition armed with new evidence for their most damaging critiques, and a public watching the chaos unfold with a mixture of fascination and concern about what it all means for the country they live in. The days and weeks ahead will reveal whether Bondi complies with congressional subpoenas or fights them. They'll reveal whether additional Republicans join Mace in formal criticism of the administration's handling of sensitive investigations. They'll reveal whether Todd Blanche and potentially Lee Zeldin can succeed where Bondi failed in delivering the revenge Trump craves. But regardless of those tactical developments, the strategic reality has already been permanently established. Donald Trump fired his own attorney general because she couldn't prosecute his political enemies. He did it publicly and humiliatingly. And in doing so, he revealed more about the limits of his power and the nature of his administration than any carefully crafted message ever could. The chilling message has been sent and received. And everyone in Washington is now calculating what it means for their own survival in the chaos that is the Trump presidency.